them on how to get Labour,
Okay.
on Labour to get voters to trust them on the economy again. I'm Jeevun Sandher, Dr. Jeevun Sandher, the head of economics at the New Economics Foundation, and of course I'm very distinguished panel here to discuss that today. McFadden, of course, Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Chris Curtis, the head of Holding Out Opinium, Daniel Johnson, the Scottish Finance spokesperson, and also Kitty Ussher, the Chief Economist at the Institute of Directors. This is obviously clearly a very important topic, but you can't win elections without winning on the economy, and voters don't trust you to make them better off, they won't vote for us. That's generally what's happened throughout my time in the Labour Party anyway. If you also look at what we have now, which is an opportunity to win, if you ignore every political event of the past 50 years, and you just ask yourself, you just look at economic crises, you find they predict changing government pretty bad. Okay, the winter of discontent and Margaret Thatcher, the financial crisis, the Conservative victory in 2010, and of course the year-end crisis, which resembles what we face today in 1992. So they clearly have an opportunity to win, given how wrong things are going at the moment. We know they're going terribly wrong, right? A decade of stagnation, wages about £5.5 lower than they should be. Public service in crisis because less growth means less tax revenues. We've all seen stories about ambulances not turning up for 12 or even 20 hours. And of course this cost of living crisis, where about half of us are struggling to pay our energy bills. That's even with the energy price freeze at the moment. So we have the opportunity, but clearly haven't done all the work. I'm sure Chris will cover it in more detail later on. But whilst Labour is doing better on the economy than the Conservatives, actually don't know are the ones who are leading. So clearly there is work for us to do to convince voters that we are better off. And we need that to win, and it's really important that we win. Right? Not just for us, of course, in this room, because there are 2.6 million kids going hungry in this country. And if we don't win, we can't sort that out. That's why we're here today. And my wonderful panel will tell us exactly how we're going to do that. So, easy. No pressure. But it's all burning when you use it. Pat, you're going to
I thought Chris was going to
I get best, yeah.
I think we should say the same Chris.
Oh no, it's one by me. Solid chairman style.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Chris Curtis, I'm head of political polling at Opinion, which is, in my humble opinion, the best polling company in the country. We work for a lot of different progressive organisations and charities in the political and social research space to try and help them understand what the public are thinking, particularly in these really difficult and challenging times. And we've run some research today, but also we've been running research for quite a long time, looking specifically at this issue of the Labour Party and the economy, because just as was set out there, it is really important. Quite often in politics we do get distracted by whatever cultural issues the government's trying to prioritise this week, but actually when you're speaking to voters out there in the country, they constantly tell us that it is the economy, it is their personal financial situation that is the most important issue. So I'm glad you all agree, which is why you've come here today. I think nothing better sums up the British economy right now than supply and demand for chairs in this room. I don't know if that works. So I'll run quickly through the research, because as I say, the economy has constantly been Labour's Achilles heel in the last few elections. Yes, Brexit's been an issue, yes, leadership's been an issue, but the economy always comes up as one of the most important issues. Most important reasons why voters are not switching over and supporting the economy. That comes down purely to two things that people bring up with us. The first of which is you're not really the party of growth. Yes, you're the party of fairness, you're the party of equality, but you're not the party of growing the economy. And the second thing is to do with debt and deficit. After Gordon Brown left office in 2008, Labour bankrupted the economy. That is a reputation that still holds in the minds of many voters, even to this day. Now, when I set out, I spoke to SME Labour about doing this panel earlier in the year, I think I called it How Does Labour Regain Trust? And when I did that, I didn't quite expect Labour to make up its match ground as it has done over the past couple of years. So before I sort of go on to what I think Labour can do further, it is worth noting the progress that Labour's made. I've got two stats here. In the final poll before Keir Starmer took over as leader of the Labour Party, the Conservatives had a 39-point lead on the question of which party is best to run the economy. In the final poll before this trust took over, the most recent poll, Labour's got a 6-point lead on that same question. So 39-point Conservative Party lead, 39-point Conservative Party lead to a 6-point Labour lead. Incredibly dramatic swing over the last couple of years. And if you ask people about the personal financial situation, it's obviously an incredibly important question, probably the most important thing that drives voter attention. Which party would be better at improving the personal financial situation? Labour's got 30 points behind on that question to 14 points ahead. Under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, Labour almost never got against us. Again, quite a dramatic turnaround that's happened over the past couple of years, driven by perhaps New England, also by the general Conservative incompetence. Having said all that, I do think that the new Liz Truss premiership does pose quite a lot of issues for the Labour Party, but I do think do need to be addressed. A lot of this was driven by the incompetence of Boris Johnson and that government administration. What we are picking up in the research right now is lots of voters willing to give the new government the benefit of the doubt, and to allow them to have a reset and to set out a new economic vision for the country. Now, I'm sure everyone has views about whether what they're doing on the economy will work. I imagine most people think it probably won't. But either way, we should accept that this is a big political moment and Labour needs to respond in a very different way to how they did before. Our new research looked at two things. Firstly, what people think are the most important issues on the economy. And secondly, whether they sort of generally trust the Conservatives or Labour model. So obviously you've got that headline that I was talking about, who to trust most on the economy, but obviously there's loads of things that make up running the economy. What people think is important there at the moment to focus on which parties do they generally trust most to do them. Of the 12 issues we tested, good news, Labour is ahead on 10 of them, most notably on cost of living, which people say is the most important inflation, the most important economic question at the moment. But one of the ones that the Labour Party is still not ahead on at the moment is economic growth. And I think this basically explains what the Conservative Party strategy is to drag out the salience and importance of economic growth. So people see that as the most important economic issue because they know that that's an area where the Conservatives are generally seen as strong. And again, that's what our research is showing. Now, I suppose this begs a big strategic question, which I will ask and then let the other panelists answer. But you sort of often end up in a situation with a question like this, where do you increase the salience of an issue which you're more trusted on, or do you try to mitigate against the fact that the Conservatives are more trusted on a different issue? So, in other words, do you try and keep the cost of living and inflation as the most important issue, do you make that the most important strategic aim, or do you try to close the gap with the Conservatives on this question of which party is most trusted on economic growth? My view is very much the latter. And Labour should be focused. Labour should make it very clear that actually what the Conservative Party is saying about economic growth is absolute hope, and actually the Labour Party is a party of growth. Why? Because to a certain extent the Conservatives do get to set the narrative, like it or not. The government, particularly the Conservative government, will always have the ability to do so. So unfortunately the Labour Party does have to play on the playing field that they set to a certain extent. But most importantly of all, they just don't deserve to be ahead on this question of economic growth. This is over a decade of the economy not growing, and I think that there is a pretty compelling argument, which it isn't going to be hard for voters out there in the country to understand, that you do not grow the economy by just throwing money on rich people. And actually an alternative Labour vision on economic growth, providing better childcare to their families, so that they're better able to get out of work, a better minimum wage, an alternative social democratic vision would actually be better at growing the economy than whatever it was that Liz Truss and Martin Gartain put forward to the country on Friday. So I think it's actually important for Labour to be taking this head on economic growth and to be proving why they're the most important party to do so. And while doing so, there's one other final thing that they need to be pressing at this point, because I said at the start there was two problems that Labour's had with the economy: one, economic growth, and two, debt deficit. This is giving Labour a very unique opportunity to make it very clear to voters that it is not the Labour Party that is the party of borrowing too much money and irresponsibly spending it. Actually, what we saw on Friday was massively untargeted tax cuts to people who don't need it and won't help the economy, and Labour should be pushing that argument that it is now the Conservatives that are party borrowing. And it's by doing those two things that I think Labour can at least sustain, if not grow, this lead on economic competence that they've built up over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Chris for his work in preparing today's meeting. And I'm always very interested in Chris's work on this issue because I'm convinced that before voters will even look at a party's policies, there are two tests that have to be passed. One of those tests is, can they trust you with their money, with the nation's finances? And the other test is, can you be trusted with the defence of the realm? And I don't believe it's possible for any political party to be elected unless they pass those two tests. I'm going to, for the purposes of this meeting, leave aside the second test on the defence of the realm, where we're very clear about our support, for example, for what the government has done in support of Ukraine, in support of NATO. This is absolutely essential to us. We are NATO founders, the Liberal Party, and I'm not going to dwell on that today. I'm going to talk about the second test, the first test I mentioned, on trust with the nation's finances. Now, often elections have been fought out on this ground in a battle of what I would call head and heart. And in that battle, the Conservative Party doesn't really try to pretend that it cares more about the NHS or schools than the Labour Party. It makes some effort, but it sort of concedes that. What it wants people to think is that these people might care about those things, but when it comes to the really tough stuff, when it comes to the management of the economy, we've got the hard heads, they might have the hearts. And in a battle between head and heart, set out like that, head usually wins election. That's the kind of election the Conservative Party is comfortable with. I'm not going to give the Conservative Party the election that they are comfortable with. A battle of head and heart. I want the Labour Party not to be just heart, but to be head and heart together. So let's think about that in the context of what we heard on Friday, because that's obviously set out the terrain for this. And I want to just go through a few points, if I may, about what we heard on Friday and how we're going to respond to it. And you've heard me or Rachel or Keir on the media over the last couple of days, so you've seen some of that. Rachel's got her speech to the conference tomorrow, which I'm really looking forward to, and then Keir on Tuesday, we'll hear more of those. But let me just give you a few points. The first word to remember in this is repudiation. Kwasi Kwarteng began his statement with a complete repudiation of the Conservatives' economic record. He stood up and he talked about being trapped in a vicious cycle of stagnation. Now, I've seen plenty of chancellors stand up and blame the previous government. But I don't think I've ever seen a chancellor stand up and blame their own government. And that's not just a parliamentary debating point. It's really important because a lot of that advantage in that head and heart battle has been based around what the Conservatives have been saying about debts and deficits over the years. He took all those lectures about debts and deficits and the importance of that, and he torched them in public. And that is really important, because when he did that, he torched a lot of things that have been responsible for giving the Conservative Party a historic lead on that battle of head and heart. So that repudiation of the Tory party is really important before we come to think of any of the individual measures. In fact, what this forced Toryism is to do, as one cartoonist pointed out, is to go back to their constituencies and ask their voters to forget everything that they'd heard from them for the last 12 years about economic management. That's what the Chancellor did when he so publicly repudiated their record of making Friday's budget. The second one I want you to think about is risk. The Conservative Party and government are running a huge risk with what they've done on Friday. They've decided to borrow a huge amount of money in order to finance what they're doing now. And I stress to you, when I talk about risk, I'm making a point about economics, not tax, not individual tax measures. They've decided to borrow a huge amount of money to do this when inflation is already high and the Bank of England is already raising interest rates and mortgage rates. And this puts the government in a sort of tug-of-war position with the bank. Whereas they borrow money to finance tax cuts, the bank is under more pressure as a result because they increase rates even higher, putting mortgage rates up even further. Expectations of where UK interest rates would go were lifted after Friday's statement. And the bank itself, when they raised interest rates on Thursday, seems a long time ago now, it's only 3 days, they also issued a statement that said that they would take account of new events when it came to their next meeting in November. Well, the new event was Friday. The new event was because the bank was already signalling that they may have to react to what was announced on Friday. And the fall in the pound, it's also a risk because it makes all the import more expensive. It adds to inflationary pressures. And I believe we've also taken a risk with institutional stability. Not having an OER report to go along with this may sound like an insider's point, but actually what were they afraid of? Spending that amount of money without having our own independent Office of Budget Responsibility report on it is itself an irresponsible thing to do. We've also fired the Permanent Secretary in the Treasury. So there's a point here about institutional stability, flip-flopping on economic policy, not allowing the forecaster of the Office of Responsibility to report on it, firing the chief economic official in the government. This does not send out a good signal about responsibility. So the second one I'd like to think about is risk. The third one is fairness. Now, fairness is allied to risk. It's not the only argument that we make in this, but we are a Labour Party, so we do make a fairness argument. In choosing to fund the set of measures that they announced on Friday, the government is in effect borrowing from my constituents in Wiltshire to pay for a tax cut for people earning over £150,000 a year. And we wouldn't be the Labour Party if we didn't point out the effect of that. And regionally speaking, if you think about where wealthier people live, that's happening all over the country. The less wealthy parts of the country are being asked to pay their future for this tax cut because they tend to live in the already wealthy parts of the country. And I don't say that because I believe in any kind of class warfare or anything like that. I don't. The Labour Party exists to transcend class differences, not to reinforce them. But we do believe in fairness. And I think what we've done is deeply divisive and unfair in doing it like that too. So that will also be part of our response. And in fact, half the benefit of the income tax cuts announced last week goes to those earning over £1,000 a year. And if the Institute of Fiscal Studies are correct on the maintenance of personal allowances, by the end of the Parliament, only those earning over 155,000 will be paying less tax. That's all. So fairness is also part of our response. The third one, the fourth thing I wanted to think about is the question of whether this will work. It's not just about borrowing, it's about what it's for. And what it's for is a return to economics. It's not borrowing for a plan of investment that really secure economic growth in the future, for the application of new technology, the modernisation of our infrastructure, the upskilling of our people, the green transition that we need to see. It's borrowing for a return to the old idea that if only we make those who are already wealthy even wealthier, if only we unleash the animal spirits, then the rest of society will benefit. That's not where we see growth coming from. We see growth coming from all of us. From every entrepreneur who starts a new business to chase their dream. From every factory worker, every worker in a business that turns up to make a new product, deliver a great service. From every teacher who equips a child with better skills for the future. Our vision of economic growth is that it comes from everybody, not just with greater incentives for the few. The final thing I want you to think about in the context of Friday is what I believe may be the sting in the tail, which is, we all know this is increased borrowing, we all know this is going to be a costly intervention. What will happen a few years down the line? If this doesn't work, how will the Conservatives respond if they're still in power? I think we know the answer. The answer will be they will come back to an agenda of cuts. That's what they'll say. We've been in this movie before. So when we respond to this, we've got to bear that in mind too, not just the immediate response, but down the line. So how do I bring all this together, Chris? It is that I think the challenge of economic trust that you've outlined is clearly shown in your polling, has been there for some time for the Labour Party, and the way that we will overcome it is to resist falling into the trap of playing the role that the Conservative Party wants us to play in elections, of saying that we are just a party of the heart. We are a party of the heart, but we also believe in wealth creation. Wealth creation and a good society hand in hand. Wealth creation and good public services hand in hand. Head and heart together. That's how I want us to position ourselves when it comes to the next election. That's how Rachel Reeves wants us to position ourselves, and it's where Keir Starmer is too. And I think if we can do that, then we can overcome the historic challenge that we are in.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm Kitty Ussher. It's fabulous to be here. Before I start my remarks, if there's anyone at the back who feels they're not enjoying standing up, I can see 1, 2, maybe 3 chairs. And to just pick up on what we had earlier, I'm slightly worried as an economist that if we have surplus of demand over supply for chairs, we may end up with chair inflation. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Chair. I also want to congratulate SME for Labour for a really extraordinarily brilliant programme of events at conference. You have shown us, though it's probably not necessary to say in this room, there's absolutely no contradiction whatsoever between wanting to see successful SMEs in our economy and being a Labour Party supporter. And in my current role as Chief Economist at the Institute of Directors, which represents 20,000 people who are running exactly those SMEs, and also being a former Labour politician, I feel that sometimes I'm a kind of living embodiment of trying to show that there is no contradiction between the two whatsoever. And although I'm officially here for the IOD, as a passionate Labour supporter, I hope you'll understand that if I say the word we, meaning Labour, I'm of course speaking in a personal capacity. And there's just a couple of points that I wanted to make following Pat's excellent remarks and Chris's brilliant introduction. And those points are these. I want to talk about how the last Labour government gained trust on the economy. And then I want to talk about the opportunity that's available for the next Labour government, because I think we can take it one step further. And then just finish very quickly, if we accept what I'm saying in those 2 points, what it means for how we should respond to Friday's mini-budget. So first of all, how the last Labour government did it. Well, I think the last Labour government really understood that there was a kind of trope, maybe, that existed in British society, which somehow thought, as Pat has just explained really well, that Labour is a bit risky when it comes to the economy. Something to do with that if we're the party that redistributes the pie, that we can't be trusted to grow the pie, and that therefore it will all end in tears. The way of thinking about this and the way that we thought about it then is that it's a kind of hygiene factor, that we don't get permission to talk about what we really care about, which is investing in public services, if we don't reassure people on our competence in the macroeconomy. So that then led to a number of things. It led to Gordon Brown deliberately portraying himself as the prudent Chancellor. It led to his golden rules. It led to really strong sort of fiscal policies that talked about debt to GDP ratios, the golden rule. And the attempt was to sort of really lock down that macroeconomic competence point. I've said before that it's like locking the whole thing in chains in a big box that you could not open, you could not let the genie out, so that we would have permission to govern and in order to do what we really wanted to do. Now the problem is what I've just said sounds a bit boring, okay? You said debt to GDP ratios, the public aren't interested in that, they shouldn't have to be either. So the next stage of that approach is and was that we have to understand that the public looks to the people that they see as experts when it comes to economic competence. And they see business leaders as the experts in judging whether the government is fit to govern on the economy or not. So then stage 2 was to make sure that business did not slag off Labour. And so that led to the prawn cocktail effects, it's very, very important. A continuous process of listening and understanding and trying to ensure at the very least that big business and city bigwigs did not come out against Labour, and if they were able to endorse us, the more the better. That's all for the good, because that shows we must therefore be competent. It also meant not going into an election saying you were going to put up business taxes, because let me let you into a little secret. Most city bosses are actually interested in running their own firms and to start getting involved in a political debate. And if their head of corporate affairs tells them that one party's going to put up taxes and the other one isn't, when 3 weeks before an election they're asked about it, they're going to say the kind of common sense response, well, I prefer that one from them. So we can't do that or we start to lose credibility. And that approach works, okay? It works. Now, my second point is that we need to do all of that. And my second point is that we can go a bit further. And in order to explain that point, I'm going to tell you a story. I was extremely privileged to be the MP for Burnley in Lancashire, not too far away from here, for 5 years. And for one of those years, I was also had that extreme privilege of serving as an extremely junior minister in the Treasury. And I was the city minister. And it meant that my life organised itself so that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was in my constituency. And then Monday to Thursday, I was in the city or talking to other large financial services institutions on behalf of the Labour government. extraordinarily diverse life, and I absolutely loved it. One day, in my constituency surgery, a constituent came to see me. He queued up for about an embarrassingly 45 minutes, probably. He took his turn, waited for all the other cases to come through, and then he sat down in front of me and he said, "You're going to go and see an investment bank on Tuesday, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yes, I am, as part of my job. How do you know?" And he said, with tears in his eyes, "My son works there, and he knows that you're coming." That was all that he wanted to say. His love as a father and the determination that he had put in to making his son succeed and go to London and have one of the highest status graduate jobs that existed at that time was so great that when his son told his dad back home that his local MP was going to come round on Tuesday, he was so bursting with pride that he wanted to tell me. It was a lovely moment. Obviously, I swear the circle later on I met him, and that was really nice. But the reason I tell you that story is that there is a suspicion in parts of the public that maybe parts of the Labour Party think somehow that it is more morally pure to work in the public sector than in the private sector. Imagine if I'd said that to my constituents. So I want us to think about what that means, and I want us to think about what we can do to have the next round of triangulation in the Labour Party as we go forward and into a general election. Because if the last Labour government triangulated in a way that said economic prosperity and social justice can go hand in hand, I want to suggest to you, this is my final remark really, I want to suggest to you that it is possible to simultaneously say, we thank our public sector workers, we thank our NHS nurses and doctors and teachers and council workers, and people who sweep the streets and make the trains run on time. We thank you and we respect you for what you're doing, it's great. And we also thank the plumbers, we thank the electricians, we thank the people with white vans, we thank the shopkeepers and the accountants and the lawyers and the people who set up their own businesses, not just the entrepreneurs, but also the people who support them, the people who have got the skills to go out and make those companies work day in, day out. We know that it's hard, we know that you're working really hard, and we salute you. Because the day that the Labour Party is able to celebrate everybody who is working to make a living for their family and to succeed, just as we celebrate those who are working directly in our public services that we are choosing to invest, is the day that people will believe that we are truly on their side and that we can truly earn their trust in order to be able to govern. So, final, what does that mean? Well, we must accept that whilst we don't like the mini budget, part of it is a trap, because if we seek to reverse all of it, and we've seen that play out in the press over the last couple of days, then we may get attacked by business leaders to whom the public looks as a demonstration of whether we are competent or not. We absolutely have to ram home the fiscal profligacy point. We absolutely have to nominally neutralise and see if we can overturn the idea that Labour is the one that spends too much, because perhaps the Conservatives are going to do it as well. But we also have to remember that to get trust on the economy, whilst productivity and investment in science and clusters and infrastructure are really important, we need to be able to tell that in a people-based way as well. And I think we've got a massive opportunity to do so. And the bit that I really like about our industrialist policies as they're emerging at the moment is the idea of the everyday economy, which Rachel Reeves popularised in the campus a couple of years ago and is now increasingly being talked about. Because that is the private sector as much as it is the public sector. It's about everyday life. Thanks very much.
the Scottish Parliament, and as ever, being the fourth speaker in such an august panel, I feel like I'd rather be met with very little to add or to say. But I think the first thing, though, I think is the observation is there is perhaps a sense of, when it comes to the question of how do we get people to trust Labour on the economy, well, look, have you seen what the other guys have just done? And I think there is a real danger in that thought, in that sentiment. I think as much as I think the decisions that were made on Friday are on historic proportions wrong. When you look at the numbers, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one who spent much of Friday afternoon looking at numbers on Bloomberg and the Financial Times and comparing them to what they look like on Black Wednesday, and realising just what the context was. This is a catastrophic mistake that I think that the Conservative government have made. But what they want us to do is talk up putting taxes back. They want us to do is talk just about how bad things are. And I think that is essentially the parameters of the trap that we will find ourselves in if we're not very careful. Because I think Pat rightly said that the two key tests are for the government. First of all, trust with the public finances and trust with the defence of the nation. But I actually think on that first point, I think there's a more fundamental text, which is actually not just trust with the nation's finances, it's trust with people's finances. And it's not just the point that the Conservatives successfully framed that we sort of drove the country into bankruptcy in 2010 and beyond. Actually, there's a huge swathe of people out there that haven't forgotten the winter of discontent in 1979. So I think we need to understand, not only the trap, but also I think the hurdle that we as the Labour Party have to overcome in order to gain people's trust with the economy. So let me set out what I think are the 3 or 4 key steps that we need to take in order to actually build that, because I think fundamentally it's about building an alternative. I think absolutely, and I agree absolutely with everything that Pat said about how to have a very clear analysis of critique. But I think we also must have a very clear and tangible alternative that we can present to the country so that they can actually opt for something that feels clear, concrete, and trustworthy. So I think the first thing we need to do is demonstrate that we get it. I think one of the biggest problems that we have very often as the Labour Party as we're talking is this. We are very comfortable talking about broad theories that describe the economy in ways that feel comfortable to us. But at best, one of the key issues with that is that might well describe the macroeconomy, but it doesn't describe people's lives. It might well, I think, set out kind of a compelling narrative as to what the economic conditions are, but it doesn't have any clarity about actually what issues people have in their day-to-day lives and the things they need in order to help them overcome those and take the opportunities that they want to take. So I think we need to be able to articulate the issues that people have, not just with energy bills. And I think we've done a very good job, I think, of describing the cost of the living crisis. But we're also living at a time which I find quite extraordinary in terms of the labour market. We have a situation, we have huge numbers of job vacancies, but we also have wage suppression going on. So on the one hand, we don't have enough workers for some key jobs, but we also have a huge number of people who can't find the pay that they need in order to pay those bills that we've just described. So I think, for example, within them, I think there's a real opportunity to describe the situation that people find themselves and the parameters of the problem, which our economic programmes solve around heating their homes, about finding a better job, about accessing the training that people need, about providing the public transport that people need in order to take advantage of those job opportunities. When I speak to employers closer to home for me, who are based in Fife, who they can identify the people to recruit, but for a lack of public transport to get people from Dundee into Fife, those people can't take up those job opportunities. So I think it's about understanding, articulating the problem. This is the key first step. I think the second point, and I think to Chris's afternoon's question about growth is that there is actually a fundamental issue at stake. That ultimately, the problem we have had in the last decade is one of growth. So it's not actually just that it's strategically the choice, it is the right thing to be talking about. And actually what we need to do is pull that issue apart. Because fundamentally the Tories misunderstand growth. That they think by simply lowering taxes that will generate growth in the economy. But it is a fallacy. Ultimately what has held the economy back is a lack of investment. And lowering personal taxation doesn't help that. But critically, increasing the cost of borrowing with what you lack as investment is completely self-defeating. So I think we need to, tackle head-on the problem with analysing why growth hasn't happened, but also how we are going to. But I think the critical point with this is we will always have to link back to the real economy, to the everyday economy, describing how those actions that will help growth will actually help people themselves in their day-to-day lives access the job, work, employment, education that they need. So we bring on to that the third point is to have that very clear, articulable plan. I think we all remember the pledge card from maybe I'm betraying my age. I know that the people younger than me in the audience, I remember the pledge card in 1997. And what was critical with that is it was a clear, concrete plan that people could actually carry around in their pockets. And what we need is a plan that is set out and clearly and succinctly, but also credibly as that. But ultimately, and I'll finish on this, is the final test that we need to deliver. So we need to understand the problem. We need to show how it will deliver growth. We have a clear plan that will deliver against it. But ultimately, I think we need to ensure that we see that through and deliver for people and demonstrate the change that we can make. Because I think, reflecting on our time in government, I think we did deliver growth, but I think we also need to make sure we deliver the right kind of growth that delivers quality and genuine opportunity for all. So I'll stop there.